Let's unbox the Black Series 6-inch figure of Vel Sartha from Andor Season 1. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. For me personally, I like to cluster my Star Wars action figure displays by movie and series. So every time there is a new show, I generally wait until I've got a few figures grouped up together before undertaking that dreaded rearrange, where you've got to take everything off your shelf and kind of shuffle everything around. Because of course, as a Star Wars collector, space is always at a premium. I love the Andor series and I've been patiently waiting for a few more figures to arrive so that I could take the time to rearrange my displays and make an Andor display right next to Rogue One. Sadly, I'm still kind of waiting. We haven't had as many figures from this fantastic show as I would have liked. And you know what? I think I'm done waiting. It's definitely time to get these figures out of their packaging and on display because it's a fantastic show. Recently did a rewatch and I really want to celebrate the show with some of my favorite Star Wars action figures where I can see them instead of being in their boxes. I recently opened up the Black Series figures of Luthen Rael and Cassian Andor. I had so much fun opening them. And up next, I have Vel Sartha, and I can't wait to get her out of her plastic-free packaging box. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll take the figure out of the box so we can check out the details and the accessories closer up. But first, let's take one last look at the packaging. Many of the Black Series 6-inch figures from the Andor series came out during the thankfully short-lived plastic-free packaging era from Hasbro. So instead of a window here at the front, we have a glossy printed image of a posed action figure trying to depict what is inside. I do appreciate Hasbro's efforts, but it really doesn't hold up, especially when we put these boxes alongside the other styles where we can see the figures inside. I think it was a hard blow, especially for fans that like to keep their figures inside their packaging. You really can't see what's going on here. And as you can see, for me personally here in New Zealand, a lot of these plastic-free packaging boxes ended up in clearance because fans just really can't see what's going on inside. I picked this one up. You can see the half-price sticker. I have tried my best. The sticker is on like glue. It's not coming off. And I'm not really that enamored with the packaging, so I didn't mind grabbing this one on sale, even if that price sticker is never coming off there. For the Andor series, we have the orange accent stripe here underneath that printed image of the figure, really vibrant, and that same color is used for the character name here. It reads Vel Sartha. Vel does have a few different outfits in the Andor series, but we don't have any kind of appendix here. There's no sort of planet or variation name here, so perhaps we will see that later on. Moving on to that fantastic side art here, we have Vel posed with her long blaster rifle, like we can see that action figure accessory in the picture there, and we've got the accent color, which looks a little bit more red in the side panel than it does on the side stripe, which is definitely more of an orange color. And at the bottom we have the character name Vel Sartha. Now I have to take a moment and say that I really am a little bit unsure about the packaging for this one in particular. Now, the actress that plays Vel Sartha is beautiful, but I don't think the artwork here nor the action figure picture here on the front are a particularly good likeness for her, which is rare, I find, for the art here. I'm not trying to dismiss the fantastic work of the artists involved in the Hasbro packaging team, but there's something about the face on this one that doesn't feel like it is a very close likeness to the actress. And I'm just going to bring in a promotional image, as we can see that Hasbro has used on the vintage collection card of Vel Sartha from Andor. So we can see the actress there in her costume on show. We can see that this is very much the same promotional picture that would have been used for the artwork. We can see her rifle there, but I just think the faces are just very different. They look like different people to me. And I think that that's quite unusual, especially since I recently opened up the Luthen Rael, Stellan Skarsgård, and Cassian Andor figures. Of course, he's played by Diego Luna, and I think those are fantastic likenesses. It's just a shame to see that I don't think I can kind of see the resemblance, but it feels a little bit different. And of course, it's even more striking when we look at the image of the action figure. I think something's weird is going on here. I don't know if they just picked a slightly odd one in the batch much for this particular promotional picture. You think Hasbro would make sure the figure is one of their best examples to be photographed for the packaging, but I feel like it's a little bit different than the actual actress's likeness there. Just thought I'd show that one as a comparison. I'm going to be opening this one up very soon as well. Moving on to the back of the box. Now again, we have a little bit of a talking point here. We can see that we have that orange stripe continuing on the back, and this one is labeled as 08 from the Andor series. Now this one is actually a mistake. So I recently opened up the Cassian Andor Black Series figure. You can see on the box here, and this one also says number 8. So clearly one of these is wrong, and we can see that it is Vel Sartha's box that is wrong, because when we line them up, Cassian's blaster art continues on. We can see the jacket there. So he is the true number 8. Vel Sartha should be labeled as number 9. So if you like to keep spreadsheets of all of your collectibles, please note that even though she is marked as 8 on the packaging, she is actually 9th in the series. But yeah, I'll just put the Cassian box away. Now again, we have a blurb here, but this is for the series rather than the character. It reads, "In an era filled with danger, deception, and intrigue, Cassian Andor embarks on a path that will turn him into the rebel hero who will challenge the evil galactic empire." So of course, it would have been helpful to have a little bit of a bio about Vel Sartha, considering she is a new character introduced in the Andor series, but we've just got a very sort of high level, not too spoilery blurb about the show. Again, on the back, like that picture there on the front, we have a gloss image of the action figure depicted inside, full head to toe, with the accessory pictured there as well. I kind of miss having that side art repeated here on the back. I always love that art, and I really miss it sort of on the back here on these styles. The rest of the packaging here, copyright warning, barcode, all of that kind of stuff. Something I do really like about the plastic-free packaging boxes is this little helpful little graphic here on the side, because of course we can't see what's inside. So we have this little graphic here. We can see a full-length picture of the action figure. We can see the height of the figure is marked as 5.3 inches or 13.6 centimeters in height, and we have one accessory, which is a blaster rifle. We can also see that plastic-free packaging note there, and a little bit of a smaller version there on the front. Overall, this is not my favorite packaging style. I much prefer the new upgraded one, where we have returned to the window boxes, and we've got a slightly more squared off version as well with thicker cardboard. Something that I did like about these was the lack of a window at the top. I know that is helpful for letting in light when there is a window at the front, but I found that dust collected very easily on the top, and I was always dusting the top of my Black Series boxes. I like this flat surface, much easier to keep clean and tidy, and we have that on the new style boxes. So while I'm a little bit nostalgic about those side angles, because of course I have a lot of those boxes, I very, very much prefer the new style. So with all of that, I'm not as fond of this particular box. I don't mind the price sticker, so let's get stuck in and check out this action figure and see if it really looks like the picture on the box. As usual, I'm going to open up my box by just snipping through the tape on the underside. And while I'm holding it, I'm just really realizing just how light this one is. Of course, we can see by that scale on the side, she is one of the shorter Star Wars characters, especially in the Black Series line. So I'm sure that is contributing to the lightness that I am feeling here in the box. So just going to carefully snip through the tape as best I can, because I do want to keep my boxes. You know, they're not going to be perhaps displayed at the front of my shelf, but I do still like to keep them all. Okay, let's get this open. Okay, and we've got that little bit of paper there tucked on the underside. Let's get the cardboard tray. It's always interesting seeing how these plastic-free packaging boxes are on the inside. Okay, so we've got the cardboard tray, and we've got a small little insert here which generally contains the accessory. This is interesting because she has a blaster rifle, but this is quite a small little packet. I'm curious to see how that's all going to fit in there. And then wrapped up in, you can see we've got Black Series branded tissue paper. We have the actual figure. So sometimes they can slip out of these little sort of straps here, but she might have to be one of those ones that I have to cut out. I do try and avoid putting scissors too close to my Star Wars action figures, but these cardboard straps, sometimes you just can't avoid it. So just going to be a little bit careful as I can to try and snip through this one. I don't want to accidentally catch the figure inside. Okay, so still quite caught. There we go. Okay, so let's unwrap her and get our first look at the figure. They really do wrap these up. Okay. And here we go. Okay. So she's obviously just a little bit sort of crooked. I think it's interesting when I compare the figures that have come in the plastic-free packaging, they don't straighten the figures out. They're all kind of wrapped up tightly. So they need a little bit of adjustment because we're obviously used to the Black Series figures that come in the plastic trays where everything's spaced well for them to sit in those trays, especially for collectors that like to keep them in their packaging. But she looks good. Of course, one of the things I'm always worried about is the sort of paint job and details on the face, because I do like to look at my figures in the store before purchasing if I am able to, and that's something that was not possible in those plastic-free packaging boxes. But yeah, she looks okay. Nothing looks broken. We'll definitely go over the paint job and articulation very shortly. Let's get her accessories out. Okay, so we've got this little paper envelope here all kind of wrapped up. Is this going to be one of those ones where it's in separate pieces that we have to assemble? Let's have a look. It definitely looked like a longer rifle in the figure. Oh, okay. Wow. We've got a folding piece. Okay. I was not expecting that. That's interesting. So that came all sort of folded up. It's really cool. I haven't seen that much on Star Wars figures. We've got a full sort of folding stock there. I'm going to have to look at the packaging to make sure that I've got all of these pieces in the right way. That's going to be interesting to get her to hold that. Okay, so that explains why that package was so small. Okay, so let's clear all of this packaging out of the way so we can go over the figure in more detail. So now I have the Vel Sartha figure and her blaster rifle accessory out of the packaging so we can go over all of the details. And I'm very thankful to see that she does look better than the picture on the front of the box would indicate. Sometimes I think certain people have faces that translate better as a 3D image. Something about the flat one angle of the picture on the box I think did a disservice to the character and the figure. She definitely does look better out of the box. But I have to say, in terms of being an accurate likeness to the original actress, I don't think this is the best in the Andor lineup. I think some of the other characters are just a little bit better in terms of their facial sculpting, in terms of being accurate to the original. But she does look good. I do see the character when I see this figure, but I like to say that some of the characters, you can sort of hear their voice when you look at them, because they just end up looking like miniature versions of their appearance on screen. For her, I'm not quite getting that. It's a pretty good toy representation of her character, but it doesn't feel like a mini likeness of her. But let's go through all of the details, sculpting, paintwork, and all of that kind of stuff, because of course this is my first look at the figure. When I was getting her out of the packaging, I noticed we have a small paint floor here, a little bit hard to see, and thankfully right on the back we've got a little bit of paint transfer here on the black of the pants. On the seat here there looks like kind of scratches. I feel like it is just a little bit of transfer of this light colored paint here, there, and there is a very, very small paint floor, almost probably too hard to see on camera. There's just a tiny little dots here on the forehead. I'm generally kind of particular about the faces. If I get the opportunity to see several Star Wars figures lined up in a store shelf display, I will go through the paint job on the faces and compare the best one. Then I start going through down the details, things like belt buckles, and then the condition of the packaging, especially if I intend to keep it on the packaging. So I wasn't able to see her face before purchasing, and I did get this one half off, but still I shouldn't be getting flaws even though I can't see what's inside the box. But still very, very minor. Thankfully, nothing sort of as a deal breaker. Unfortunately, I have opened up a figure from a plastic-free packaging. It was in the vintage collection line that once I opened it up, it had a big paint floor where the paint was kind of misaligned to the sculpting underneath. And that was something that I was really quite sad about, because I would not have purchased that particular figure had I been able to see that prior to purchasing. So thankfully, she looks good. And of course, I'm not really ever going to be posing her from the back. It's so minimal. I'm looking up very, very close. So let's go through all of the paint details and the sculpting. So went over the likeness. I think she has quite striking eyes. She's got very blue eyes, which I can see that with the fabulous digital printing here. But there's just something, I don't know, it's just not quite there. Close, but not not quite there. And there are some really nice actual painted details here as well. So because of this, of course, this outfit is when she is committing the heist on Aldhani. She wears a few different outfits, you know, when they're sort of living on Aldhani. She's got the ones with furs. Then we see here on Coruscant where she's very glamorous, but this one is her sort of heist outfit where she's a little bit more prepped for action. So one thing that I sort of noticed to caught my eye, she has a very small little metallic paint dot there in her ear, and I had to sort of double check. Now she does actually wear an earpiece, you know, which is helpful for communication when you're committing a heist. So yeah, that was a little detail that I was not expecting, this really tiny little dot, because it's not in the right place for an earring. It's kind of, you know, where you would be wearing an earpiece, but I thought that was really interesting, a really fine little detail that I was not expecting there. And of course we don't have that on the other side. We do have some really nice hair sculpting here. Now, first impressions, I think this is a little bit of a darker blonde than I think she appears on screen perhaps. And I know if you have blonde hair, you know that sometimes there is a little bit of an undertone to green if you use dyes to achieve a blonde hair. And I think that there is just a little bit of a green undertone here. It's just not quite a sort of a brighter blonde, but I'm just being very particular here. I think I would have liked it just being a slightly lighter blonde, but I know that Andor in general, it kind of has some darker lighting and color grading to it, especially for some of those scenes on Aldhani. You know, the heist was committed late at night, so a lot of that lighting is very dim. So I understand her hair is not going to be sort of a vibrant, sort of glamorous Coruscant blonde there either. But we do have some really nice kind of shading going on here. We can see that we have a darker, almost brown color here at the roots. Now the hair that is pulled back into the ponytail is sculpted as part of the face. We've got a nice tidy paint line which really matches that sculpted hairline really well. We've just got that tiny little bit there where it's not quite matched up, very, very minimal, but the rest of this is really nice and tidy, and we can see that darker sort of caramel brown color at the hairline, and then it's sort of an ombre into a lighter yellow color here towards, and then we have a separate sculpted piece which is attached as the ponytail here, which is really nice. Of course, we get a lot more sort of detail and definition when we use separate pieces, especially when the hair is longer. For the guys with the short hair, you can get away with it just being sculpted all as one piece with the head. And of course, we can see that we have a couple of braids here. So there is one braid that kind of hangs down beneath her hair. On this one here, it is sculpted as part of the hair. It's not a separate piece underneath, but we can see just that little bit of the end of the braid sort of hanging down beneath the hair. We can see that we have a second one that is sculpted in the hair, just kind of hanging there on the inside. It's a little bit flat, but I can still see that detail. And then the third braid is hanging separate over her shoulder. So this is actually really flexible, you can see. So you can move this around and pose it where you want to. You can have it tucked around there at the back, or you can have it over her shoulder. Really nice. Sometimes these can be quite brittle, and I'm always a little bit worried because they're so fine, worried about sort of bending them and snapping them off while you're posing and sort of checking out the details of your action figure. This one, I'm not worried about it snapping. It's quite flexible, which is quite nice because this plastic has a little bit of flex too, but I'm not really going to bend her hair. I'm not looking for articulation at the hair. And of course, we've got a tight attachment point. I don't want to accidentally snap it off from that attachment point. It looks pretty nice and tight there, and we've got a pretty good color match. This is sculpted plastic, while this part here is painted. So there is a very subtle sort of texture and color difference, particularly under strong lighting. But overall, a pretty good match. We potentially could have had a little bit of highlighting with the hair just to sort of really bring out the texture there, but we've got a lot of good sculpting lines, and shadows are giving us some highlights there within the sculpting. So overall, really good hair. And of course, we've got that painted detail there. Really good digital printing on the eyes. We've also got eyebrows and a little bit of an accent on the lip. No other sort of blush or anything on the cheeks there. So moving down, she has one of the more simple outfits from the Black series sort of hero characters that we have so far. A lot of them have sort of big sections of coats, jackets, sort of tunics and things like that. She has probably the closest to normal earthwear, I think. You know, if you walked down the street here on Earth wearing this outfit, you would probably not get any looks. So we've got sort of a brown leather jacket here that's sort of closed here at the side with the collar worn a little bit open. We've got black pants, knee-high brown buckled boots, and a few sort of greeblies just to kind of sort of add a little bit of a Star Wars touch, like this silver sort of bracelet part here, which is probably a communicator or some kind of, you know, Star Wars version of a watch, kind of with this large band here. So let's go over the painting and the articulation details. So because this is a little bit simpler, there's not as much details to kind of really celebrate and get excited about compared to some of the others, because it does look a little bit simpler. And that's one of the things that, of course, you win some, you lose some when it comes to what you pay for with Star Wars action figures. Sometimes you get very large ones with lots of accessories and details, and then of course for the same Black Series figure price you're getting a much shorter figure with less details going on and only one accessory, of course. So I was kind of happy that I was able to find this one half price, because she is a little bit more on the simpler side in terms of the sculpting. Of course, I don't really want to rank Star Wars characters in terms of favorites, which ones am I, you know, more happier to pay more than others. I love the Andor lineup, I want to collect them all, but you know, sometimes when you think about the actual, just, you know, the amount of plastic that you're paying for, she is a little bit more on the smaller side, even though I really do love the character. So her jacket does have some interesting details. Of course, they don't want it to look like it's an off-the-shelf Earth jacket, and we generally don't see a lot in the way of buttons and zippers in Star Wars. So we've got some interesting clasps here that we can see are sculpted into the side here, these little sort of loops here. And the collar is worn open to expose a little bit of a shirt underneath. We have a little bit of a very dark green accent color here on that collar, and it's kind of a little bit of a muted lime green kind of color there at the collar. And of course that brown is just all over. It looks like this is just the brown plastic with these painted details, so there isn't really any other highlighting, but I do like the actual sculpting details here of the jacket. We've got all of the sort of stitching lines, we've got some trim along the bottom edge here, we've got creasing, we can sort of see the way that the fabric would be pulling towards the closure there, and of course we've got creasing as leather jackets do along the sleeves here, and some really nice kind of fabric rippling here in the back. I have to say the jacket looks a little bit more fitted to her shape from the back. We can really sort of see it scooping there to fit her contours. From the front, it has a wider appearance. It's kind of a bit of an optical illusion. It doesn't look quite as fitted across the front. It looks a little bit more broad, particularly in this area here. But what I think is really interesting, and I'm kind of skipping ahead here a little bit, is that for a lot of Black Series figures, we have some level of mid-torso articulation, particularly on Stormtroopers and Clone Troopers. It tends to hit about here in line with where the armor fits between the chest and the abdomen. And I was curious because I couldn't see any articulation line here. But when I was just straightening her up out of the packaging, I noticed that she still does have that mid-torso sort of articulation. And now that I can bend her, I can kind of feel that the jacket section here is actually made from that slightly squishier rubbery plastic. You can see I'm just able to squeeze it there. So I think that is why the jacket is kind of giving us a slightly sort of bulkier shape, because it actually has to fit over articulation there on the underside, which isn't immediately evident. You can see just how much I'm able to bend her front and back there. And you can hear that plastic creaking because it is actually kind of stretching a little bit against the underside there. So I thought that was really interesting. It was completely hidden. And personally for me, I am looking at the accuracy of figures. I know articulation is important, but for me, if I have to rank a favorite, I like the accuracy over articulation. So I like the fact that that is still part of the movement of the figure without just cutting into the jacket and looking a bit awkward. I like the way that Hasbro has done that, and it makes me appreciate that, yes, okay, the jacket is going to fit a little bit more of a bulkier shape here in the front because it's actually over top of an underside rather than just being a flat plastic piece like the arms are. And we also do get that side to side movement as well. We still get that creaking noise, but it's actually quite movable. For some figures, it's actually kind of really stiff to switch them side to side. It really feels like you're fighting with the figure or worried about breaking something, but she twists to the side quite easily, despite that sort of squeaky noise. That's just really the jacket plastic kind of stretching there. So overall, I'm appreciating this figure more than I'm checking out the features, which is always fun. Okay, so that is the torso. I'm really excited about that, even though there isn't much in the way of sort of a lot of impressive details or different paint applications. Of course, we've just got those small details there at the collar, but if that's all that was on the original costume, then that's all that we can expect Hasbro to include on the figures. She does have different outfits. I'm hoping to see more versions of Vel in later releases. Of course, Hasbro still has a lot of other characters, but she was an important one, and I hope to see more of her in Series 2 as well. So let's check out her arms. Of course, I really like the articulation here. We can see the way that that jacket sculpting is just kind of folded down here on the elbows. A really common sort of sculpting technique, but it's one that I really like. It means that when you've got the arms down like that, we've just got this really nice sort of smooth, continuous shape there to the arms. Let's check out. So on some figures, we get a really tight fit because, of course, this is going to be rubbery. We can just see some movement there. So sort of pushing it down into place, I can barely see the space. On old figures, you know, with those plastic Jedi cloaks and things like that, and some of the old Saga figures, there would be quite a large gap around at the shoulders, you know, where they sort of assembled all of the pieces together. But in the modern Hasbro figures, we've got some really nice tight joins. So, of course, this and this look like they are part of the same garment rather than sleeves and a vest worn over the top, which is really sort of helps the overall appearance there. Now with her arms down by the side, I can just see the top of that articulation just starting to peek out there. But let's test out how well her arms can go up, because sometimes with these jackets being so tight, oh, that arm is a bit tight, but that's more of the articulation. Sometimes with those close, tight joins around the shoulders, it means that it can restrict how high we can raise the arms, but she looks quite good. That's about as high as I would expect. Of course, when we rotate it, we can go up quite high there as well. So she's got some good movement out of the packaging. Of course, they're always just a little bit stiff the first time you really move them around. Just want to quickly test her head there as well, because of course we've got this long hair. I can actually get it over the shoulders on both sides, a little bit tight there. Of course, I'm probably not going to be twisting her head quite that way around. We've got a reasonable sort of chin down, but of course with this much hair on the back, we're not really going to be tipping her head back much there. But, you know, reasonable side to side. And because this is flexible, I'm not worried about that when I'm moving her head around. So we should be able to get some, you know, good perspectives there for, you know, posing for our scenes. Let's test out those elbows. Of course, we can see the articulation points here at the front, but I quite like the way that the arms look on modern Star Wars action figures when we bend the elbows. I really like this. So of course, because it comes a little bit lower here in the back, it does a good job of kind of hiding it. We can start to see the articulation there on the underside. We're not really going to see when our figures are on display. And we get a nice tight angle here at the front. That's really nice. Of course, we can rotate that, move it around. The arms on her actually fit fairly close to the body, a little bit tighter on this side than this side. When I put her arm all the way down, we can kind of see that this one, it could just be my particular figure, I've got a little bit more of a gap on this side than this side, but of course, she comes with a two-handed weapon. Most likely, I am going to be posing her holding that blaster rifle with two hands. So let's see. We can get her arms quite close together. But of course, I'm probably going to be holding her a little bit more something like this. And of course, we can see that we can rotate the hands. For this one, we've got a front and back. It's a little bit minimal. And we can see just here in the black, we've got that front and back. And of course, we can spin it around nice and easily on this one here. And on this hand, we have the side to side. A little bit of a rocking motion there. And of course, we can spin her around. Now, she has fingerless gloves. We can can see they're painted in black, and we can see the grips of the hands really well sometimes when we've got that strong contrast in the paint. So on this hand, she's sort of holding her hand like this, which should be good for holding on to that longer edge of her blaster rifle there. Hopefully we've got to wiggle her fingers to get a good wide grip. You can see that grip there. And then on this hand, we have an extended trigger finger with a good hook. Hopefully that's really going to fit into a trigger guard on a blaster accessory there. Hoping that hand's going to be wide enough, but I do find one of the positives, one of the sort of helpful things about the female characters is they have smaller hands or smaller fingers, which means less plastic, which means by nature that plastic just tends to be a little bit more flexible. So I find that even though their hands are smaller, I find them a little bit easier to sort of flex them to fit in accessories, because sometimes it's a little bit of a fight with those sort of male characters or ones with bulkier hands. That rigid plastic just doesn't want to move, and it can be a bit of a fight sometimes to get them to hold their accessories. So because she's got, so jumping on into the pants, because she's got rather plain pants with nothing kind of hiding them, we don't really have anything to sort of help disguise the slightly awkward nature of the action figure articulation here at the hips. It's all kind of exposed, and I know if there's nothing really there, we can't really hide it. We have a little bit of that undershirt that we can see there when we bend her back, but it stops well before we get to the hips, and we can see that also coming here in the back, her shirt being visible there. It's kind of like a beige, sort of a tan color there. So that's not really going to help us much in terms of disguising this. Of course, that means we're going to have very free articulation, but she isn't, you know, like a staff weapon or lightsaber. I'm not going to be doing a lot of sort of acrobatics with her. I'm just getting her arms up out of the way. But let's test her legs, because of course, if there's nothing in the way, she should be able to get some pretty high kicks. Yeah, that's pretty high. I haven't been able to get a figure to kick quite that high in a little while. That's all the way up, and let's test out to the side. Yep, and of course we're not really going to get much towards the back, but yes, very nice and high, because of course there's nothing really in the way. She can kick all the way, and we can see that because of course we've also got nothing hiding it. We can see that swivel point there at the top of the thigh, so I can turn the pants. A little bit hard to see because it's black on black, but I can easily and freely move her at that thigh point there. That helps just kind of, I like being able to tweak the legs in particular to make sure that my figures are standing up nice and sturdy for display. And sometimes it sort of helps just to be able to sort of give all of those little tweaking little points there. Of course, by rotating the thighs, you can see that we've got some sculpted lines, and they do become misaligned when we rotate them around. So if you want them to look all kind of seamless, then you're probably not going to want to rotate the legs. And personally, I don't mind it if it's really flat like this. Sometimes we have deep grooves and sort of sculpted details that look a little bit, they really draw the eye when you start to sort of slice them across at that point. But these ones are really flat. The black on black detail does get a little bit lost, so kind of useful. And of course we can see all of the sort of pant sculpting here in the back. Looks really nice, and black on black does a pretty good job of hiding the articulation here at the back of the knees. It's one of the best colors, honestly. Stormtroopers, clone troopers, a lot of the articulation is really well hidden at the elbows and the knees and those joints that are kind of hidden in between the plates of white armor, which works really well for action figures. We can see the pants come down in front of the knee articulation here. Again, really good place to sort of hide all of that, because of course the pants tend to wrinkle a lot, especially when they're tucked into knee-high boots. So all of the kind of wrinkling in the sculpting there is doing a pretty good job of hiding that articulation point. Works really well. So let's test out her knees. Always a little bit stiff straight out of the box, and we can get to there, which is about what I would expect without. It's even sort of a little bit higher than a lot of other figures. A lot of free articulation points here, and let's test out those ankles. A little bit stiff, but yes, I can get a good point there. Looks pretty good. Now, I don't see any kind of additional painting details on the pants. They look like these are made out of black plastic. This part is painted because it's a little bit more of a matte finish here on the seat of the pants compared to the legs. And then for this part, Again, it looks like this might be sculpted in brown plastic because I can see inside that post hole there on the underside. So the lower half of the legs are sculpted in the brown plastic, and then this part here, just before the boots to the knee, is painted, but all up it's a pretty good match because I can just make out the very subtle sort of a sheen change. This is a little bit more of a softer sort of matte finish compared to the shinier sort of gloss finish of the plastic of the pants, but overall very hard to see, and we only have a tiny little band here showing at the front. You can just sort of notice it a little bit more at the back that is two different sort of materials with a painted finish and a gloss plastic finish. The boots, of course, we don't have any kind of weathering, which may bother some collectors because of course our Dani has grass and mud, so we don't have any kind of weathering of any sort on her boots. But if you are adventurous and artistic, I'm sure there are many talented collectors that could just add a little bit of weathering to these boots. I honestly don't mind it though. Sometimes weathering can be tricky with action figures. Sometimes Hasbro tries to sort of really go on and it just looks a little bit messy. So I honestly don't mind that we don't really have much in the way of extra painted details here. There are some fantastic sculpting details here though. Her boots very much remind me of sort of prequel Obi-Wan Kenobi boots with these straps on the sort of caramel brown colors here. It's really nice. We can see the treads sculpted in there really well. Fantastic. And of course we looked at that articulation. We can get a little bit pointing like that there as well. So that's going to really help make sure that she's steady on display. Really good articulation, as I was hoping, because of course she doesn't have big bulky costume pieces to really get in the way. And I'm really appreciating this jacket a lot better now that I can see that it's actually rubbery and it's hiding that articulation, because that's just really going to help get some cool poses, being able to sort of move. You don't really want a completely locked off torso. So of course I've been moving her every which way. Let's just quickly sort of get her back into a bit more of a neutral pose. She does need a little bit of tweaking to be completely steady, but I do find some of the guy characters, even though they are sort of heavier, the big chunky boots often give them a sort of a heavy, steady grounding. She's going to need just a little bit of tweaking, but every action figure is put together just a little bit different. It's just those little subtle, minor, micro little differences in the assembly. So she stands up pretty well, though she's probably going to need just a little bit of tweaking. One final, just sort of little bit of a close paint detail is that sort of bracelet detail there. Really nice. Very cool. So I think that is all of the sort of the details of the figure herself. She looks like she's going to be a really fun addition to my Andor Black Series lineup. I'm just wishing that there was more. One thing I'm noticing is I am getting a lot of little black flecks. I find that particularly common with the figures from the plastic-free packaging. I feel like they give the ones that are in the plastic tray just a little bit more of a dust off. I feel like a lot of sort of factory flecks of paint and sort of dust get wrapped up in that tissue paper, and I always end up with it all over my hands while I'm checking out my action figures. But it doesn't look like it's actually coming off the figure. I don't see sort of paint sort of flaking off anywhere. It just seems to have been just loose little sort of factory remnants there that's been caught up with the figure. But she looks cool. Okay, so I'm going to look at her accessories. So that caught me off guard because I was expecting to see a longer blaster rifle. I've still got paint on my hands. So this is really fascinating. I haven't come across this much in the Black Series line with this sort of movable piece here. This is going to be really fun. So it looks like it's made in an all over sort of speckly gray plastic. It's very dark, but it's not quite sort of that metallic finish. We've just got a slight speckle finish. Every now and again there's just a little bit of a fleck or speckle in the plastic that catches my eye. And we do have some silver painted details on this part here. We've got a little bit at the front. Oh, that moved. Is this going to extend? That part moved. Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, cool. It's even longer. Okay, so there we go. Again, because we've just got those pictures on the box, I don't really fully see all of the details. Cool. And we've got more silver painted details on this side here as well. more on the top, along the side. And of course, I can put this up the top. I don't think that's really how it's supposed to go, but that might be a helpful spot to just put it when I'm putting it in her hand, so I can just fold that back. But if you want to, you can fold it up under there and pop that in her hands all sort of compact like that. This is going to be fun. We've got some different options here for how we can use this accessory. I kind of like it when I don't need to pull accessories apart. They kind of just work as intended. This just kind of slides in and out. There was a little bit of a click, so I don't feel like I have to pull that completely out or take it apart. I had a real problem with the blaster sort of sniper rifle that came with the crosshair figure from Bad Batch. It was supposed to sort of come apart, but mine refused to come apart. It was fused, and it was kind of a shame because I couldn't sort of disassemble it to put it in his backpack and sort of stow it away. It was kind of annoying. So I like this kind of more user-friendly sort of modular system here. I don't need to pull it apart or do anything kind of stressful. I really don't want to break my precious Star Wars toys, so I like it when it's a little bit more user-friendly and I can just sort of move things around without having to push and pull and potentially break little peg points. That's something I'm very anxious about. I don't want to break anything, but this is really nice. Okay, so we've got a bit of a square-ish trigger guard here. So the grip itself is kind of small and rather flat. So I'm hoping that that is going to be easy for her to hold. So I'm just going to fold this part up at the top there. And we'll see how easily this is going to go into her hands. Okay. So I do generally spend some time after, you know, getting my figures out, just getting all of the poses just quite right before they go onto the display. So that wasn't actually that hard to do. A little bit of a wriggle because, of course, this is a little bit more of a flatter grip. Her smaller hands held that well, and her finger hooks into that trigger guard well. We've got lots of space. Some trigger guards are very small and it can be quite the sort of little trick to try and get the finger to line up with that little hole there, but that is a really nice big trigger guard. She's a smaller character, of course. She's got very slender fingers, but she holds on to that quite well. You can see how well those fingers are gripping it there. So the other trick is how well am I going to be able to hold this with the other hand. Now, sometimes when you're trying to get these characters to hold weapons in one hand, they start popping out of the other hand. So let's see how easily I can get this one in here. Okay, there we go. I was a little bit worried about her finger. You can see it's kind of just a little bit bent against the gun because it is putting pressure there, but she is holding that well. Okay, and we can kind of fold this down there. She looks really cool. Neat. That wasn't too hard at all. I was a little bit worried. So I will spend some time tweaking and trying some subtly alternate poses here, because while this one feels pretty good, and if this is the best that I can do, then I'm not upset. But I do find in this particular pose, her finger is just pulling away a little bit from the trigger guard. It's not really sitting in there anymore, which I don't really worry about. But I do find in this one, this folding stock piece is a little bit long for her forearm here. It's not really able to rest inside her arm here. So I feel like perhaps maybe more of a wider armed pose here or something else to sort of really get that into position. I will note that I think it's interesting that for the art of the action figure photography here on the box, they have not even sort of indicated that you can do that. They have simply posed her pointing the blaster rifle downward. The stock is not really in against her arm there at any way. So I think that that's interesting that even sort of didn't attempt to show that there. I do like the pose, so that's not, you know, a sort of a critique of the action figure photography, but I just think it's interesting that it isn't actually even sort of depicted there on the packaging. So I am a little bit of a beginner when it comes to posing. I'm not the best, still learning, still experimenting. I do tend to be a little bit more on the cautious side when really trying out different angles and things like that with my action figures. I'm trying not to be too rough. So I really like this. I think she holds it well. It's very secure in her hands. I didn't really feel like I needed to really fight with her hands to get this grip, which looks really good. And of course, we've got those options. I can fold this away. I can slide that back in, but I really like it. Looks really cool. We don't see quite as many Star Wars characters with sniper rifles or blaster rifles in this sort of configuration. It's really quite cool there. So She looks really cool. Now let's test out how well she balances, because of course sometimes putting a larger weapon held in the front can offset the balance a little bit. So obviously going to tweak her a little bit, but she's still steady even though she's got her arms and an accessory sort of held to the front of her body. It's not really throwing her balance off. Overall, she looks great, and I'm relieved, I have to admit, because I was a little bit worried based on that figure picture on the front of the box. I didn't have high hopes, and as you can see, I paid half price for it because I wasn't sure if it was going to really live up to my expectations. I think she looks great, ready to commit an Imperial heist on old Dani. So because she is one of the shorter Black Series figures I have, I want to get her lined up with some of my other Andor Black Series figures just to see how my lineup is coming along and to compare her in size and a little bit of sort of just fun seeing them all together. So I'm going to quickly grab my other Andor Black Series figures. So here are 4 of my Black Series figures from the Andor series. We have Luthen Rael, Cassian Andor, Vel Sartha, and Bix Colleen. And you can see that Vel Sartha is the shortest across all of them. Of course, she's going to be shorter than the male characters here. Luthen Rael is quite tall, but she is a little bit shorter than Bix Colleen as well. And you can see she does look a little bit more on the simpler side. We have a long tunic piece on her, then we have a coat and a very long coat. So she is a little bit on the lighter side in terms of details, but she does have a very big accessory, one of the larger ones. Bix Colleen does have a few sort of tech accessories, no weapons. These ones have weapons, of course, but I really like just, she looks armed to the teeth and ready to go. I think that that's really fun. Sort of very dressed for combat, which is, of course, very fitting for her character. This is a really fun lineup. I have to say that so far, Cassian himself is my favorite. I recently unboxed this one. I had so much fun. I think the details are fantastic, and I really can't wait to add more to my Andor lineup. I know that Hasbro has revealed that Deirdre Mero is going to be joining the Black Series and Vintage Collection lineups in the near future. I think she was a fantastic character. I can't wait to add her to my collection, but I'm really hoping that we'll get a few more characters. Perhaps Hasbro is waiting for Series 2. Let's hope so, because there were so many characters. I want Marva, I want Kino Loy. There are just so many fantastic characters, and I really want them to release B2 Emo, that adorable little red droid, a little bit more wider available for collectors like myself. That 2-pack is hard to get, especially for fans here in New Zealand. We never saw it here. So this is a really neat lineup. I think she looks really cool. I'm going to play around a little bit with the posing, but if this is the best I can achieve, then I think that that's fun. She looks great in this lineup. Really fantastic. I'm having so much fun celebrating the Andor series after my recent rewatch. I'm definitely got a good beginnings here of an Andor series lineup. I've still got a couple of vintage carded figures from the Andor series that I'm going to be opening up very shortly. So if you're a fan of Andor, do check around for those. I'll have them up in a week or so. I'm really looking forward to getting those on my display as well. Vel Sartha was such a neat character. I do hope to see more of her in the action figure lineup and in Andor series too. I had a lot of fun with this unboxing. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars collectible and had a lot of fun checking out all of the details and that accessory. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I recently unboxed the Cassian Andor figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.